third-party research reporting, and I called it Paradise Lost, Paradise Regained, because with cycling it could go either way. You could have a really good cycling environment, but if you don't preserve it, you might lose it. Or the other thing can happen too, where you have a place that's overcrowded with cars, but if you really set your mind to it, then you can turn it around and make it into a good place for cycling. So I'm from Albania. I put up a map of where Albania is, north of Greece, and I was raised in the capital, which is Tirana. And the country until 1990 was communist. So because of that, cars were not allowed, and the whole city was a cycling paradise, much like China used to be, or Vietnam, if you've been to those places. So it looked like this. There were only bicycles, no cars around. It was perfectly safe for people to cycle. In fact, I used to cycle quite a lot myself. This is a picture of myself and my father cycling in the center. We're not the only ones. You can see there is another cyclist right there in the back. And sometimes my parents would even allow me to cycle on my own. It was safe enough to do. This is right in the city center. Okay, so move forward, 1990, communism ends, cars are allowed. And this is what the city is looking like nowadays. So we had our cycling paradise and we lost it. So this is daytime kind of traffic. This is nighttime kind of traffic. It's just overrun with cars all day long. Then, when I was a grown-up for my postdoc, I did a stint in Holland, in the Netherlands. I was there for 2.5 years. And as you know, Holland is considered the cycling paradise of Europe, but I want to talk very briefly how they got there. So here are some pictures. This is what the cycling environment looks like in Holland. You don't see too many Lycra cyclists. There it's cycling for regular people, young children, grandmas, just everybody. So this is an urban kind of environment. Then not many people know that there are also quite a few intercity paths, so people can even commute by bicycle from town to town. And I got to cycling too after I hadn't done it for many years, so that's me showing off my Giant bicycle, Giant the brand. But the country was not always that way. In the post-war period, like a lot of Europe, people fell in love with cars. Cars were the new thing, the new technology. So if we look at pictures of Amsterdam from the 1960s, it looked like this. It was very, very crowded with cars, and large chunks of the city, including a lot of historic districts, were being torn down to accommodate large roads and parking. Then, in the 1970s, there was this sort of awakening in the country. People said, okay, we've had enough of this. We had our love affair with the car, it didn't work out, so we'll turn it around. And so several things conspired. One was this brilliant new idea, segregated bicycle lanes that run along traffic on city streets. These were combined with massive anti-car protests. So this is a protest in the 70s in front of City Hall in Amsterdam, a lot of cyclists camping right in front of the municipality. And then Holland also happened to have supportive politicians at the time. So this is a picture here of the Prime Minister, the Dutch Prime Minister at the time with his wife at a bicycle rally. So these three factors, ideas, interests, and institutions, to become more theoretical, they sort of combined and gave birth to what I call the Dutch SUV. That looks like this, a little different to an Australian SUV. So that's how the Dutch regained their cycling paradise. And so much so that bicycles even became a problem at some point. Cities became so overrun with bicycles that bike parking became a sort of nuisance. So this is a picture of the train station in Delft, the city where I lived, where bicycles were thrown on the ground. It was just a million bicycles there. They did renovate it towards the end of my stay in Delft. So now they have a nice fancy bicycle station with multi-story garages, but this is how it looked for a while. And it's a little bit the same story that repeats itself with a lot of transport modes. I've put a couple of other pictures in here. For example, this is from New York in the late 1800s. This is from what it's called the Great Manure Crisis of the time in New York, and this was caused by another form of transportation, the predominant form of transportation at the time, horses and horse carriages. So once cars came around, the manure problem was resolved, but then cars caused their own problem. They took over city space in a different way. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you. And I also invite you to take a look at the posters we put around that present different ways to design streets. Like Jonathan said, it's not always a choice between parking and cycling. Both could coexist very well in Brisbane.
Thanks so much, Dorina.